A letter to America. Today, I believe we stand at a crossroads in our history. For decades, we've been lurching down this path that's taking us far from our heritage, and now it's time for us to figure out who we are and what we stand for as Americans. In order to do that, we have to remember how this country started and what has made it the most prosperous and generous in history. We did not achieve prosperity through government intervention. We achieved it by individual effort. People like you and me who worked hard, did the right thing, tried to help our neighbors, and who believed that our success or failure lay in our very own hands. Americans are a generous people. We give more donations per year than any other country, and people at all income levels donate to charities. This doesn't even count the many hours of volunteer work that people all across this country give in the service of others. We're an optimistic people. We believe that if you put in the effort, you will reap the benefit. We are not easily daunted, and we have always understood that along the way to success comes failure, but we pick ourselves up and try again. Americans change careers and start our own businesses at an amazing rate. We believe that we can make the pie bigger, that our success does not mean someone else has to fail. We're a creative people. Because we've been relatively free in the past, people can envision and invent things that nobody else has thought of. They can collaborate with others and hope that everybody will benefit. Americans have invented many things, from artificial hearts to defibrillators to CPR, from digital cameras to lasers to the internet, from nylon to fiberglass to many prescription drugs. And these things are a result of our history. We forget that America was a great experiment. Before the American Revolution, governments, usually monarchies, held all the power, and they would dole out some rights and privileges to citizens. The U.S. Constitution reversed this. Our Constitution gives specific powers to the government, and it retains all other rights and privileges for us, its citizens. What our founding fathers gave us was truly a gift. They stated clearly that the U.S. government was to have only those powers specifically outlined in the Constitution. They also gave us a process to add to or change that Constitution. They wanted a small government, a government by and for the people, a government that would interfere in our lives only when absolutely necessary. We have strayed very far from our beginnings. We now look to the government to regulate most areas of our lives, and to save us from ourselves, from requiring warning labels on practically every item to bailing us out financially when we have made bad decisions. We let the government decide how much of our hard-earned money we get to keep, and we've given them the power to take money from one person and give it to another person. Do you think that the pioneers looked to the government to solve their problems? When their wagon trains came to the Mississippi River, did they wait around for the government to ferry them across? No, they didn't. They went miles out of their way to find a ford, or coated the bottoms of their wagons with tar and floated them across. Or they turned back and made a life for themselves in Illinois or Indiana or some other place. And do you think that the immigrants who came to this country with no possessions had welcome packages waiting for them? Did they wait around for government training or for the government to find them a job? No, they didn't. They worked hard at whatever work they could find, often for horribly low wages, and they managed to make a better life for their children and their children's children. And just what are we passing on to our children? Over $10 trillion in U.S. debt, and growing every year. Our politicians from both parties deserve the blame from this one. Our government has run a deficit almost every year since 1969, regardless of which party was in power. Our debt has been growing, and it is really hard to see how we will ever pay it off. We are giving our children an attitude of entitlement. We used to understand that if we wanted something, we would have to earn it, and perhaps even sacrifice something else to get it. We also understood that we just might not get everything that we wanted. Now we seem to think that we're entitled to things just because we want them. And we're giving our children a dependence on the government. We assume that the government will protect us from all bad things, that the government somehow is smarter than we are. We forget that we are the government, that the government has no money other than our money, and that every time we look for protection, we're giving up some measure of freedom. The party's over. We've lived on credit, not just as individuals, but as a society, and we'll have to pay the price sooner or later. If we keep asking the government to do more and more and protect us from our choices, we will just keep digging the hole deeper. And every time we ask the government to do something, we're handing more power to a small group of people who live in Washington, D.C. It's time for us as Americans to decide what kind of people we are. I have very little faith in silver-tongued politicians who are good at telling us what we want to hear, but bad at telling us the truth. But I still have faith that the American people at heart are still self-reliant, honest, hardworking, and generous. And now it's time for us to begin acting that way and asking our leaders to treat us that way. Until we shift back to our roots, to the attitudes and behaviors that made us the most prosperous nation on earth, we will continue our downward spiral. It's time for us to decide what kind of people we want to be and to begin a serious discussion about the role of our government.